The silk dress her mother had forced her into that morning was now torn at the hem and stained with mud. But Penelope Rutherford didn't care as her boots pounded through the snow-covered mountain pass, her breath coming in ragged gasps that burned her lungs in the frigid December air of 1882. Behind her, somewhere in the darkness of the Oregon wilderness, she could hear the distant shouts of her father's men, their voices carrying across the frozen landscape as they searched for the runaway bride who had fled her own wedding ceremony just hours before. The heavy snowfall had started shortly after she escaped through the church's side door, and now fat flakes swirled around her, obscuring her vision and making every step treacherous as she climbed higher into the Cascade Mountains, away from Oregon City and the life that had been chosen for her without her consent. Her feet slipped on an icy rock, and she caught herself against a pine tree, the rough bark scraping her palm through her thin gloves. The wedding dress beneath her wool coat was completely inadequate for this weather, but there had been no time to change, no time to plan anything beyond the desperate need to escape, before she found herself legally bound to Marcus Whitfield, a man 30 years her senior who had looked at her during their engagement like she was a prize mare he had purchased. At 20 years old, Penelope had spent her entire life being told what to do, where to go, how to behave, and who to marry, and something inside her had finally snapped when the minister had asked if anyone objected to the union. She had wanted to scream that she objected, that every fiber of her being rejected this fate, but the words had stuck in her throat until the ceremony had progressed to the point where she was supposed to say her vows. Instead, she had simply turned and run. The temperature was dropping rapidly as night fell completely, and Penelope knew she was in serious danger. She had no supplies, no real plan, and only the vaguest idea of the geography beyond Oregon City. She had heard stories of people freezing to death in these mountains, of bodies found in spring after the snow melted. But even that seemed preferable to a lifetime trapped in a marriage to a man who had made it clear he expected absolute obedience from his wife. Her father had arranged the match because Marcus owned the largest lumber operation in the territory, and the union would secure the Rutherford family's financial future. Her own feelings on the matter had been deemed irrelevant. She pushed forward, her legs aching and her face numb from the cold. The snow was getting deeper with every step, now reaching past her ankles and soaking through her boots. Her teeth chattered so violently she bit her tongue and tasted blood. Just when she thought she might have to find shelter under a tree and hope she survived until morning, she saw a faint orange glow through the curtain of falling snow. Light meant fire, fire meant people, and people meant potential help or potential danger. At this point, she had no choice but to take the risk. As she stumbled closer, the shape of a small cabin materialized through the snowstorm. Smoke rose from a stone chimney, and she could see the warm flicker of firelight through a window. A lean-to stable stood to one side, and she could hear a horse shifting inside, protected from the storm. With the last of her strength, Penelope made her way to the door and knocked, her frozen knuckles barely able to make enough noise. When no one answered immediately, she knocked again, harder this time, desperation lending her strength. The door swung open, and she found herself looking up at a man who appeared to be in his mid-20s, tall and broad-shouldered, with dark hair that fell to his collar, and several days' worth of stubble on his strong jaw. He wore a simple cotton shirt and denim pants, and his startled green eyes widened as he took in the sight of the half-frozen woman in a ruined wedding dress standing on his doorstep in the middle of a blizzard. "Please," Penelope managed to say through her chattering teeth. "Please help me." The man didn't hesitate. He reached out and pulled her gently inside, shutting the door firmly against the howling wind. "Good Lord, you are freezing," he said, his voice carrying a hint of a drawl that suggested he had come from somewhere south. "Come here by the fire." He guided her to a rough-hewn wooden chair positioned near the stone fireplace, where a healthy fire crackled and popped. The sudden warmth was almost painful on her frozen skin, and she held her hands out toward the flames, unable to stop shaking. The cabin was small but well-maintained, with a bed in one corner, a simple kitchen area with a cast-iron stove, and shelves lined with supplies. Everything was neat and organized, speaking to the methodical nature of its occupant. "What in heaven's name are you doing out in this storm dressed like that?" the man asked, moving to a trunk at the foot of his bed. He pulled out several thick wool blankets and brought them to her, draping them over her shoulders. "Where did you come from?" "Oregon City," Penelope answered, her voice still shaking. "I was running away." "Oregon City is more than 8 miles from here," he said, crouching down in front of her so he could look at her face. His expression was concerned but not judgmental. "You walked 8 miles through a blizzard in a wedding dress." "I did not have much choice," she said. "I could not marry him." Understanding dawned in his eyes, followed by something that looked like respect. "You ran away from your own wedding." She nodded, and to her horror, felt tears start to stream down her cheeks. Now that she was safe and warm, the reality of what she had done was beginning to sink in. "My father arranged it. Marcus Whitfield, the lumber baron. He is 50 years old and I am 20, and he looks at me like I am property he has purchased, and I just could not do it. I could not stand there and promise to love and obey him when the thought of his hands on me makes my skin crawl." The man stood and went to his kitchen area, ladling something from a pot that hung over a smaller fire in the cooking stove. He brought her a tin cup filled with hot coffee, and she wrapped her frozen fingers around it gratefully. "My name is Vincent Ashford," he said, "and I think you might be the bravest woman I have ever met." She looked up at him in surprise and found him smiling at her. It was a genuine smile that reached his eyes, transforming his face from merely handsome to something that made her heart skip a beat despite her exhausted state. "Most people would say I was foolish," she said softly. "Most people have never had the courage to run toward an uncertain future rather than accept a certain misery," Vincent replied. He pulled another chair close to the fire and sat down, giving her space but staying near enough that his presence was comforting. "What is your name?" "Penelope Rutherford," she said, then added with a bitter laugh, "though I suppose by now I was meant to be Penelope Whitfield. My father will be furious. He will send people to find me." "Well, Penelope Rutherford, you are welcome to stay here until the storm passes and you are strong enough to figure out your next move," Vincent said. "I do not have much, but what I have is yours." She studied him over the rim of her coffee cup. He had kind eyes and an honest face, and there was something about the way he looked at her that was entirely different from the way Marcus had looked at her. Vincent looked at her like she was a person, not a possession. "Why are you helping me?" "You do not know anything about me. For all you know, I could be a terrible person, and my family might be right to force this marriage." Vincent shook his head. "No one has the right to force another person into marriage," he said firmly. "And I am helping you because it is the right thing to do. I came out west to get away from people who thought money and status gave them the right to control others. I will not turn away someone who is trying to do the same thing." They sat in comfortable silence for a while as Penelope drank her coffee and gradually stopped shaking. The warmth of the fire and the blankets was seeping into her bones, and exhaustion was beginning to overtake her now that she was safe. She noticed Vincent watching her with a thoughtful expression, and she realized she must look absolutely ridiculous in her mud-stained, torn wedding dress with her elaborate hairstyle falling down around her shoulders. "I must look a fright," she said, reaching up to touch her tangled hair. "You look like a woman who fought for her freedom," Vincent said quietly. "There is nothing frightening about that, only beautiful." The sincerity in his voice made her throat tight with emotion. No one had ever spoken to her like that before. Her father had always criticized her appearance, saying she needed to be more elegant, more refined, more suitable for the kind of husband he wanted her to attract. Marcus had looked at her with cold appraisal, commenting on her figure and her face like he was inspecting livestock. But Vincent looked at her like she was a person worthy of respect. "Thank you," she whispered, "for everything, for taking me in, for not asking more questions, for not judging me." "Everyone deserves a chance to choose their own path," Vincent said. He stood and went to a cupboard, pulling out some bread and cheese. "You must be hungry. It is not fancy, but it is food." Penelope realized she was starving. She had been too nervous to eat anything at the wedding breakfast, and that felt like a lifetime ago. She accepted the simple meal gratefully and ate, while Vincent busied himself preparing a sleeping area for her. He brought more blankets and a pillow to create a comfortable spot near the fire, and she watched him work with efficient, practiced movements. "You must let me take the floor," she said when she realized he was giving up his bed for her. "This is your home. I am the intruder." "You are my guest," Vincent corrected gently, "and I have slept in far worse places than a floor in front of a warm fire. Please do not argue. You need proper rest after what you have been through." She was too tired to protest further. Once she had finished eating, Vincent politely turned his back while she removed her ruined dress and wrapped herself in the blankets like a cocoon. The bed was surprisingly comfortable, the mattress filled with fresh straw and the quilts heavy and warm. She could hear Vincent settling himself on the floor, and the crackling of the fire, and the howl of the wind outside, but inside the cabin she felt safer than she had in months. "Vincent," she said into the darkness. "Yes. Why are you out here alone? Do you not have family or a wife waiting for you somewhere?" There was a long pause before he answered. "I came from Texas originally. My family has a ranch there, but my father wanted me to marry the daughter of a neighboring rancher to combine the properties. I did not love her and she did not love me, but our fathers had arranged everything. I tried to make it work for a while, but eventually I realized I could not spend my life in a marriage based on land and cattle. So I left. I have been working as a ranch hand and cowboy wherever I can find work, moving around, sending money back to my family, but keeping my distance. This cabin belongs to the ranch I work for during the warmer months. They let me stay here through the winter in exchange for keeping an eye on the property." Penelope felt a surge of connection to this man who had also run from an arranged marriage. "You think we are cowards?" she asked quietly. "For running instead of honoring our family's wishes. I think we are brave for choosing our own happiness over someone else's plans," Vincent said firmly. "It would be easier to just go along with what is expected. Running takes courage." "I do not feel very brave," Penelope admitted. "I feel terrified. I have no money, no prospects, no skills that anyone would pay me for. I do not know what I am going to do." "You will figure it out," Vincent said, and there was such confidence in his voice that she almost believed him. "You survived 8 miles through a blizzard in a wedding dress. You can survive anything." She smiled in the darkness, comforted by his words and his presence. Within minutes, exhaustion claimed her and she fell into a deep, dreamless sleep. When she woke, pale winter sunlight was streaming through the window and the smell of coffee and bacon filled the cabin. She sat up, momentarily disoriented, until the events of the previous day came flooding back. Vincent was at the stove, cooking breakfast, and he turned when he heard her move. "Good morning," he said with a warm smile. "How are you feeling?" "Sore," Penelope admitted, becoming aware of aches in muscles she had not known she had. "But alive." "That is a good start," Vincent said. He brought her a cup of coffee and a plate of bacon and fried cornmeal mush. "The storm has passed. The snow is deep, but the sky is clear. You can see for miles." After she had eaten and Vincent had once again politely given her privacy, Penelope managed to make herself more presentable. Her wedding dress was beyond repair, stiff with dried mud and torn in several places. She looked at it with a mixture of relief and anxiety. She could not wear it, but she had nothing else. Vincent must have anticipated this problem, because he produced a set of clothes that he explained had belonged to the ranch owner's son before he moved to California. There were denim pants, a wool shirt, a leather vest, and even a pair of boots that were only slightly too large. Penelope had never worn pants in her life, but she was in no position to be particular about propriety. She dressed quickly, finding the masculine clothes surprisingly comfortable and practical. When she emerged from behind the partition Vincent had rigged with a blanket to give her privacy, he looked at her with undisguised admiration. "You look like you were born to wear those," he said. She felt herself blush but could not help smiling. "They are much more practical than a corset and petticoats," she admitted, "though my mother would faint if she could see me now." "Your mother wanted you to marry a man you did not love," Vincent pointed out. "Perhaps her opinion should not matter as much as your own comfort." They spent the morning talking, and Penelope found herself opening up to Vincent in a way she had never opened up to anyone. She told him about her childhood in Oregon City, about her father's obsession with social status and financial security, about her mother's passive acceptance of everything her father decided. She told him about the suffocating feeling of being groomed for marriage like it was her only purpose in life, about the way Marcus Whitfield had looked at her when their engagement was announced, like he had won a prize at a fair. Vincent listened without interrupting, and when she finally ran out of words, he shared more of his own story. He told her about growing up on a ranch in Texas, about learning to ride and rope and herd cattle, about the wide open spaces and the freedom of working with animals and the land. He told her about the slow realization that his father saw him not as a son but as a piece in a business strategy, and the painful decision to leave everything familiar and strike out on his own. "You regret it?" Penelope asked. "Leaving your family?" Vincent considered the question carefully. "I regret the pain it caused my mother," he said. "She did not understand why I would not just marry Clara and take over part of the ranch, but I do not regret claiming my own life. I would rather be poor and free than wealthy and trapped." "That is exactly how I feel," Penelope said, relieved to hear someone else put into words what she had been struggling to express. "Everyone kept telling me how lucky I was that Marcus Whitfield wanted to marry me, how secure my future would be, how I would never want for anything. But all I could think about was how I would be wanting for everything that truly mattered. Freedom, choice, love." "Love," Vincent repeated softly, and their eyes met across the small cabin. Something passed between them in that moment, a recognition and a spark that made Penelope's heart race. Before either of them could say anything more, they heard the sound of horses approaching. Vincent moved quickly to the window and looked out, his expression growing serious. "There are 3 men on horseback coming up the trail," he said. "They look like they are searching for something." Penelope felt her blood run cold. "They are looking for me," she said, standing on shaking legs. "My father must have sent them." Vincent turned to her, his jaw set with determination. "What do you want to do? I will not let them take you if you do not want to go." The fact that he asked her what she wanted, That he was prepared to stand with her against whoever was coming, meant more to Penelope than she could express. She moved to the window and peered out carefully. She recognized the men immediately. They were the sons of other prominent families in Oregon City, friends of Marcus Whitfield who often served as his enforcers when business deals needed a show of force. "They will not listen to reason," she said quietly. "They will say they are here to rescue me and take me back to my family. They will insist it is for my own good." "Then we will have to convince them otherwise," Vincent said. He moved to a corner of the cabin and retrieved a rifle, checking that it was loaded. Penelope's eyes widened, but he shook his head. "I will not hurt anyone unless I have to. But they need to understand that you are here by choice, and you are under my protection." The knock on the door came a moment later, hard and demanding. Vincent positioned himself between Penelope and the door before opening it. The three men stood on the porch, their faces red from cold and exertion. The one in front, a burly man named Thomas Drake, scowled when he saw Vincent. "We are looking for Miss Penelope Rutherford," Thomas said in a voice that expected immediate obedience. "We have reason to believe she came this way. Her father is very worried about her." "Miss Rutherford is here," Vincent said calmly. "She is safe and she is here of her own free will." Thomas tried to look past Vincent into the cabin. "We need to speak with her. We have orders to bring her back to Oregon City." "You can speak with her right here," Vincent said, not moving from the doorway. "But she is not going anywhere unless she chooses to go." Penelope stepped forward, gathering her courage. "I am not going back, Thomas," she said clearly. "Please tell my father that I am safe, but I will not marry Marcus Whitfield. I will not marry anyone I do not choose for myself." Thomas's expression hardened. "Your father was very clear, Miss Rutherford. You are to come back immediately. This is nonsense. You cannot survive out here alone. Be reasonable." "She is not alone," Vincent said quietly, but there was steel in his voice. "And she has made her choice. I suggest you respect it." One of the other men, a younger fellow named Peter, stepped forward aggressively. "Who do you think you are? You are just some cowboy squatting in a cabin. Miss Rutherford is engaged to one of the most important men in the territory. You have no right to keep her here." "I am not keeping her anywhere," Vincent replied evenly. "She is free to make her own decisions. That is how freedom works." "This is ridiculous," Thomas said, his patience clearly running out. "Miss Rutherford, if you do not come with us voluntarily, we have been authorized to bring you back by force if necessary." Vincent raised the rifle slightly, just enough to make his point. "I do not think you want to try that," he said calmly, "because I promise you it will not end the way you expect." There was a tense silence as the men assessed the situation. They were 3 against 1, but Vincent had the advantage of position and a loaded rifle, and more importantly, he had the conviction of someone defending what was right. Penelope held her breath, terrified that violence was about to erupt. Finally, Thomas backed down slightly. "You are making a mistake, Miss Rutherford," he said, directing his words past Vincent. "Your father is a powerful man. Marcus Whitfield is a powerful man. They will not let this go. They will find you, and when they do, there will be consequences." "I will face those consequences when they come," Penelope said, trying to sound braver than she felt. "But I will not go back now. Please, Thomas, just tell them you could not find me. Tell them I disappeared into the wilderness. Let them think I perished in the storm. It would be a kindness." Thomas shook his head. "I cannot do that. Your father deserves to know you are alive." He looked at Vincent with contempt. "I hope you know what you are getting yourself into, cowboy. The Rutherfords and Marcus Whitfield do not forget debts owed or insults given." "I am not worried about the Rutherfords or Marcus Whitfield," Vincent said. "I am only concerned with making sure Miss Rutherford gets to live the life she chooses. The three men left, their horses' hooves crunching through the snow as they headed back toward Oregon City. Vincent closed the door and set the rifle aside, and Penelope found herself trembling with released tension. Without thinking, she stepped forward and threw her arms around him, burying her face against his chest. "Thank you," she said, her voice muffled by his shirt. "Thank you for standing up for me. No one has ever done that before." Vincent's arms came around her carefully, holding her like she was something precious. "You do not need to thank me," he said softly. "I only did what anyone decent would do." "You did what no one else has ever done," Penelope corrected, pulling back to look up at him. "You asked me what I wanted. You defended my right to choose. That is not something I have ever experienced before." They stood like that for a long moment, and Penelope became acutely aware of how close they were, of the strength in Vincent's arms and the warmth of his body, and the way he was looking at her with such tenderness. Her heart was pounding, but not from fear this time. "Penelope," Vincent said quietly, and her name on his lips sounded like a prayer. "I know this is not the time, and I know we have only just met, but I need you to know something." "What?" she whispered. "When you showed up at my door last night, half frozen and running from a marriage you did not want, I saw the bravest thing I have ever witnessed," he said. "And spending today with you, hearing your story, seeing your strength, I have realized something. I spent years running from an arranged marriage, convinced that I was not meant to be with anyone, that marriage itself was the trap. But maybe I was wrong. Maybe the trap was not marriage. Maybe it was marrying the wrong person." Penelope's breath caught in her throat. "What are you saying?" Vincent reached up and gently tucked a strand of her dark hair behind her ear, his fingers lingering against her cheek. "I am saying that you came here running from an arranged marriage. And I am standing here, a man who also ran from an arranged marriage, and I am thinking what a strange and wonderful thing fate is." He smiled, and there was both humor and absolute seriousness in his expression. "So here is what I propose. You were supposed to marry a man you did not choose. That did not sit right with you, and I respect that. But what if you arranged a marriage with someone you did choose? What if you arranged one with me?" Penelope stared at him in shock. "Are you asking me to marry you? We have known each other for less than a day." "I am not asking you to marry me tomorrow," Vincent clarified, though his eyes were dancing with something that looked like hope. "I am asking if you would consider it. I am asking if you would stay here with me, get to know me, let me get to know you, and see if maybe we could build something together. Something based on choice and respect, and maybe, if we are very lucky, love." "I do not understand," Penelope said, her mind reeling. "Why would you want to marry me? You do not know anything about me. I have no money, no prospects, nothing to offer you." "You have yourself to offer," Vincent said simply. "Your courage, your intelligence, your determination. You risk death rather than live a lie. That tells me everything I need to know about your character. As for what I have to offer you, it is not much. A simple life, hard work, honesty, and freedom. Freedom to choose your own path, to be your own person, to never be told what to do or who to be." Tears were streaming down Penelope's cheeks, but they were not tears of sadness. "You are offering me everything I have ever wanted," she said wonderingly. "Everything I never thought I could have. So what do you say?" Vincent asked, and she could hear the vulnerability beneath his confident words. "Will you consider arranging a marriage with me? One based on choice and equality, and the hope that maybe we could fall in love along the way." Penelope thought about Marcus Whitfield and his cold eyes and his assumption of ownership. She thought about her father's demands and her mother's passive acceptance. She thought about the life that had been planned for her, a life of luxury and misery. And then she looked at Vincent, who was offering her something completely different, a partnership, a choice, a chance. "Yes," she said, and the word felt like freedom. "Yes, I will stay. I will get to know you. I will see if we can build something together. But I have to tell you, Vincent Ashford, I think I am already halfway in love with you just for asking me what I want." The smile that broke across Vincent's face was like the sun coming out from behind clouds. He pulled her close and kissed her forehead gently, reverently. "Then I will spend every day giving you more reasons to love me," he promised. "And I will spend every day learning to love you more than I already do." They spent the rest of that day, and the days that followed, getting to know each other. Vincent taught Penelope how to chop wood and maintain the fire, how to cook simple meals over a cast iron stove, how to care for the horse in the lean-to stable. She learned that Vincent was patient and kind, that he laughed easily and worked hard, that he treated her like an equal partner rather than a subordinate. Penelope, in turn, shared more of her life with him. She told him about the books she had read in secret, the education she had pursued despite her father's belief that too much learning made women unmarriageable. She shared her dreams of seeing more of the world, of learning new things, of making her own decisions. Vincent listened to everything she said with genuine interest, asking questions and encouraging her to keep talking about the things that mattered to her. In the evenings, they would sit by the fire and talk for hours. Vincent told her stories about working on cattle drives, about the vast emptiness of the plains and the satisfaction of honest work. Penelope told him about Oregon City, about the logging industry and the rough frontier town society that tried so hard to be refined. They discovered shared tastes in literature, both loving adventure stories and poetry. They debated politics and philosophy, finding they agreed on most things and respected each other's views when they did not. As the days turned into weeks, Penelope found herself falling more deeply in love with Vincent. It was not the dramatic, overwhelming passion described in novels. It was something quieter and deeper, a growing certainty that this was the person she wanted to spend her life with. She loved the way he looked at her in the morning when they were both still sleepy and disheveled. She loved the way he always asked her opinion before making decisions. She loved his strength and his gentleness, the way he could split wood with powerful strokes and then be infinitely careful when helping her over an icy patch of ground. Vincent seemed to be falling in love with her too. She caught him watching her with soft eyes when he thought she was not looking. He found excuses to be near her, to touch her hand or shoulder. He brought her wildflowers he found growing in protected spots under the snow. He carved her a wooden comb from a piece of pine and presented it to her shyly, like a boy giving his first gift to a girl he liked. One night, as they sat by the fire after dinner, Vincent reached over and took her hand. His calloused fingers intertwined with hers, and he looked at her with an expression that made her heart flutter. "Penelope," he said quietly, "I think I have fallen in love with you." She smiled, feeling warmth spread through her chest. "I think I have fallen in love with you too," she admitted. "I did not think it was possible to feel this way about someone, to feel safe and excited and peaceful and passionate all at once." "It is terrifying," Vincent said with a small laugh. "I spent so long avoiding any kind of attachment, and now I cannot imagine my life without you in it. These past weeks have been the happiest I have ever been, and every day I wake up grateful that you stumbled through a blizzard to my door." "So what do we do now?" Penelope asked. "We cannot stay in this cabin forever. Eventually, spring will come and you will need to return to ranch work, and my father and Marcus Whitfield will not stop looking for me." Vincent's expression grew serious. "I have been thinking about that," he said. "I have some money saved, and I know people in other parts of the territory who might be willing to give us both work. We could move somewhere your father would not think to look, start fresh, build a life together." "But what about your family?" Penelope asked. "Do you not want to reconcile with them someday?" "I would like to," Vincent admitted, "but only on my terms. Only when I am established enough that they can see I made the right choice, and only if they accept you as my wife." The word wife sent a thrill through Penelope. "Is that a proposal?" she asked, trying to keep her voice light but unable to hide her hope. Vincent stood and pulled her to her feet, keeping hold of her hands. "Penelope Rutherford," he said, looking into her eyes with complete sincerity. "I know I suggested this marriage arrangement only a few weeks ago, and I know many people would say we are crazy for falling in love so quickly. But I have never been more certain of anything in my life. I love you. I love your courage and your intelligence and your determination. I love the way you laugh at my terrible jokes and the way you challenge my assumptions. I love who I am when I am with you. Will you marry me? Not because anyone arranged it, not because it makes financial sense, not because society expects it, but because we choose each other." Penelope felt tears streaming down her cheeks again, but she was smiling so widely her face hurt. "Yes," she said firmly. "Yes, Vincent Ashford, I will marry you. I choose you. I choose this life with you. I choose love and freedom and partnership. Yes." Vincent let out a whoop of joy and picked her up, spinning her around the small cabin while she laughed and held onto his shoulders. When he set her down, he cupped her face in his hands and kissed her for the first time. It was gentle and sweet and full of promise, and Penelope felt like her heart might burst from happiness. They decided to get married as soon as possible, but the logistics were complicated. They could not go to Oregon City, where Penelope's father and Marcus Whitfield would certainly be watching for her. Instead, Vincent suggested they travel to a small settlement called Timber Falls, about 30 miles to the east, where he knew a preacher who asked few questions and valued personal freedom above social conventions. The journey took 2 days on horseback, with Penelope riding behind Vincent on his sturdy bay gelding. They followed mountain trails through snow-covered forests, camping one night under the stars with a fire to keep them warm. Vincent proved to be an excellent outdoorsman, knowing how to find shelter and make camp efficiently. Penelope had never spent a night outside before, but with Vincent beside her, she felt safe and even adventurous. Timber Falls turned out to be little more than a dozen buildings clustered around a crossroads, but it had a general store, a saloon, and a small church. The preacher, Reverend Samuel Hayes, was a grizzled older man with kind eyes who listened to their story without judgment. "So you are running from an arranged marriage to marry for love instead," he said, nodding approvingly. "That is something I can support. The good book says a man shall leave his father and mother and cleave unto his wife, but it does not say anything about fathers forcing their daughters into marriages they do not want. I will marry you, and I will do it today if you like." They were married that afternoon in the small wooden church, with Reverend Hayes' wife and the owner of the general store serving as witnesses. Penelope wore a simple dress that the Reverend's wife had lent her, and Vincent wore his cleanest shirt and pants. There were no flowers, no music, no elaborate ceremony, but when Vincent slipped a simple gold band on her finger and said, "I do," Penelope felt more married than she would have standing in the finest church in Oregon City, wearing the most expensive dress. The Reverend pronounced them husband and wife, and Vincent kissed her with such tenderness and joy that Penelope felt like she was floating. This was her choice. This was her life. This was love. They spent their wedding night in a small room above the general store that the owner rented out to travelers. It was simple and clean, with a comfortable bed and a window that looked out over the snow-covered mountains. Vincent was gentle and patient, and Penelope discovered that the marriage bed was not the terrifying ordeal her mother had obliquely warned her about, but something beautiful and connecting when it was with someone you loved and who loved you in return. Afterward, they lay together in the darkness, Penelope's head on Vincent's chest and his arm around her shoulders. "Are you happy?" he asked softly. "Happier than I have ever been," she said honestly. "I keep waiting to wake up and discover this is all a dream." "It is not a dream," Vincent assured her, pressing a kiss to the top of her head. "This is real. You are my wife. I am your husband. We chose each other and nothing can change that." "What if my father finds us?" Penelope asked, voicing the fear that had been lurking in the back of her mind. "What if he tries to annul the marriage or forces me to go back?" "He cannot annul a marriage that has been consummated," Vincent said practically. "And I will not let him take you anywhere you do not want to go. We are married now, Penelope. That means I have a legal right to protect you from anyone who would try to harm you, even your own family." "It still seems strange that getting married actually gave me more freedom rather than less," Penelope mused. "But I suppose that is because I chose the right person to marry." "We chose each other," Vincent corrected. "And I promise you, Penelope, I will spend the rest of my life making sure you never regret that choice." They stayed in Timber Falls for a few days, using some of Vincent's savings to purchase supplies and warmer clothes for the journey ahead. Vincent had heard of work available on a ranch near a town called Bend, further south and east, where the winters were slightly milder, and where no one would know about a runaway bride from Oregon City. Before they left, Penelope made a decision. She wrote a letter to her parents, explaining that she was safe, that she was married, and that she would not be coming back. She did not tell them where she was or who she had married, but she tried to express that she was happy and hoped they could eventually understand and accept her choice. She left the letter with Reverend Hayes, who promised to have it delivered to Oregon City by a trusted messenger who would not reveal its origin. The journey to Bend took over a week, as they had to move slowly through the winter landscape. They followed old fur trappers' trails and stayed at way stations when they could, camping out when they could not. It was hard travel, but Penelope found she loved the adventure of it. She loved waking up each morning next to her husband, loved working together to break camp and continue their journey, loved the growing confidence she felt in her ability to survive and thrive in this wild country. Vincent proved to be an excellent teacher, showing her how to navigate by the stars, how to read weather signs, how to find water and judge the safety of ice. He treated her like a capable partner rather than a fragile ornament, and Penelope blossomed under his respect and encouragement. They arrived in Bend in late January of 1883, nearly 2 months after Penelope had run from her wedding. The town was larger than Timber Falls but smaller than Oregon City, with a bustling lumber industry and a growing population of settlers attracted by the availability of land. Vincent inquired about the ranch work he had heard about and learned that the Pine Ridge Ranch, about 10 miles outside of town, was looking for hands and also needed someone to help manage the household and keep records. The ranch owner, a weathered man named Jack Morrison, looked them both over with shrewd eyes. "You are newlyweds?" he asked bluntly. "Yes, sir," Vincent replied. "Married just a few weeks ago. We are both hard workers and we are looking for a place to start our life together." Jack nodded slowly. "I can use a man who knows cattle and horses, and my wife has been asking for help with the housework and books for months. The pay is not great, but there is a small cabin on the property you can live in, and you will eat with the family. If you do good work, I will make it worth your while." They accepted immediately, and Vincent and Penelope moved into the small cabin on the Pine Ridge Ranch the next day. It was similar to the cabin where they had first met, but slightly larger, with space for a real kitchen and a separate sleeping area. It needed work, but Penelope could see the potential. With effort and care, they could turn it into a real home. The months that followed were some of the hardest and happiest of Penelope's life. She woke before dawn each day to help Mrs. Morrison with breakfast for the ranch hands, then spent her mornings managing the ranch accounts and correspondence. Mrs. Morrison, a practical woman named Helen who treated Penelope like a daughter, taught her how to cook hearty meals, how to preserve food, how to make soap and candles, and all the practical skills Penelope had never learned in her sheltered upbringing. In the afternoons, when the household work was done, Penelope often walked out to watch Vincent working with the cattle and horses. He had a natural way with animals, and she loved watching him ride, loved the confidence and skill he displayed. In the evenings, they would return to their cabin together, exhausted but satisfied, and work on making their small home more comfortable. Vincent built furniture from rough lumber, making a table and chairs, shelves for Penelope's growing collection of books, and a rocking chair he presented to her with a shy smile. Penelope sewed curtains and quilts, planted an herb garden outside the door, and learned how to make the simple cabin feel like the home she had always dreamed of. By summer, Penelope realized she was pregnant. She had suspected for a few weeks, but when she finally told Vincent, he picked her up and spun her around just like he had on the night they got engaged, his face shining with joy. "We are going to have a baby," he kept saying, like he could not quite believe it. "You are going to be a mother. I am going to be a father. Are you happy?" Penelope asked, studying his face carefully. "I know we have only been married a few months. I know we are still building our life here." "Happy," Vincent repeated incredulously. "Penelope, I am more than happy. I am overwhelmed with joy. A baby. Our baby. A little person who will be a combination of both of us. How could I be anything but thrilled?" His excitement was contagious, and Penelope found herself looking forward to motherhood with anticipation rather than fear. Mrs. Morrison, who had raised 4 children of her own, became an invaluable source of advice and support. She showed Penelope how to make baby clothes and diapers, shared her knowledge about pregnancy and childbirth, and promised to be there when the time came. The baby was born in early February of 1884, almost exactly 2 years after Penelope had run through the snow from her arranged marriage. It was a boy, healthy and loud, with Vincent's dark hair and Penelope's gray eyes. They named him James after Vincent's grandfather, and Penelope thought she had never seen anything as beautiful as her husband holding their newborn son with infinite gentleness. "Hello, James," Vincent whispered to the baby, his voice thick with emotion. "I am your father. I promise I will always listen to you. I promise I will never force you to be someone you are not. I promise I will teach you that love and respect matter more than money or status." Penelope felt tears sliding down her cheeks as she watched them. This was everything she had wanted. This was the life she had chosen. This tiny cabin on a ranch in Oregon was more home than the big house in Oregon City had ever been, because here she was valued and respected and loved. As James grew from a baby into a toddler, Penelope and Vincent's life settled into a comfortable rhythm. Vincent continued to work on the ranch, earning Jack Morrison's respect and trust until he was promoted to foreman. Penelope managed the household accounts and helped with the cooking, but she also found time to pursue her own interests. She started teaching some of the ranch hands to read and write in the evenings, and she began writing articles about ranch life that she submitted to newspapers in larger cities. To her delight, several were published, and she began earning a small income from her writing. When James was 2 years old, Penelope discovered she was pregnant again. This time the baby was a girl, born in the autumn of 1886. They named her Sarah, and she had her mother's dark hair and her father's green eyes. Vincent was just as devoted to his daughter as he was to his son, and Penelope loved watching him play with both children, his patience and gentleness never wavering. One evening, when James was 4 and Sarah was 2, there was a knock on the cabin door. Vincent answered it to find a well-dressed stranger standing on the porch. The man introduced himself as a lawyer from Oregon City, and Penelope felt her blood run cold. "What do you want?" Vincent asked, his voice hard. The lawyer held up his hands in a peaceful gesture. "I have been sent by Mr. and Mrs. Rutherford," he said. "They have asked me to deliver a message to their daughter if she is willing to receive it." Penelope came to stand beside her husband, her heart pounding. "I am willing to listen," she said carefully. The lawyer handed her a sealed letter. "Your mother wrote this," he said. "She has asked me to assure you that no one is trying to force you to return or to annul your marriage. She simply wishes to communicate with you if you are amenable." After the lawyer left, Penelope sat by the fire and opened the letter with trembling hands. Vincent sat beside her, James on his lap and Sarah playing with wooden blocks at their feet. The letter was in her mother's careful handwriting, and as Penelope read, tears began to stream down her face. Her mother wrote that she had been wrong to support the arranged marriage. She wrote that when Penelope's letter had arrived explaining that she was married and happy, her mother had felt both relief and shame. Relief that her daughter was safe, and shame that it had taken such a drastic action for her to realize she had been prioritizing the wrong things. The letter explained that Penelope's father had been furious at first, and Marcus Whitfield had threatened legal action, but eventually both men had been convinced to let the matter drop. Whitfield had married someone else, a woman from Portland who apparently did not mind his domineering ways. The letter went on to say that Penelope's mother wanted to meet her grandchildren, if Penelope was willing. She promised that Penelope's father would respect her choices and her marriage, though he was still not ready to write himself. She wrote that she understood if Penelope could not forgive them, but she hoped that someday they might have a relationship again. "What do you want to do?" Vincent asked softly when Penelope had finished reading. Penelope thought about it for a long time, watching her children play. "I think I want to write back," she said finally. "I think I want my children to know their grandmother if she truly has changed. But I will not go back to Oregon City, and I will not expose James and Sarah to anyone who does not respect the life we have built." "Then we will invite your mother here," Vincent said. "She can see how happy we are. She can meet her grandchildren in our home on our terms." And that was what they did. Penelope wrote back, extending an invitation for her mother to visit the ranch. 3 months later, a carriage arrived carrying Alina Rutherford, who stepped out looking nervous and hopeful. When she saw Penelope standing on the porch of the cabin with a toddler on her hip and a young boy holding her hand, Alina began to cry. "You look so happy," she said, her voice breaking. "I was so worried that you would be struggling and suffering, but you look happier than I ever saw you in Oregon City." "I am happy, Mother," Penelope said, and found that she could smile at the older woman. "I have a husband who loves and respects me, children who are healthy and happy, and a life I chose for myself. Come inside. Let me introduce you to your grandchildren." The visit was tentative at first, but Alina proved to be a doting grandmother. She was enchanted by James and Sarah, and she treated Vincent with genuine respect, thanking him repeatedly for making her daughter so happy. By the end of the week-long visit, Penelope found that she had forgiven her mother, though she knew their relationship would never be what it might have been if Alina had stood up for her daughter's right to choose. Before Alina left, she had a private conversation with Penelope. "Your father may never admit he was wrong," she said quietly, "but he has softened, He speaks of you sometimes, wondering how you are. I think he is proud of you in his way, even if he cannot say it." "That is more than I expected," Penelope said honestly. "I do not need his approval anymore, Mother. I have built a life without it, but I am glad we can have this connection." Alina promised to visit again, and she kept that promise. Over the years, she came to the ranch several times, bringing gifts for the children and news from Oregon City. She even convinced Penelope's father to write a few stilted letters, though he never visited in person. It was not the family relationship Penelope might have hoped for, but it was something, and she found that she was content with it. As the years passed, Vincent and Penelope's family grew. Another son arrived in 1889, whom they named Thomas, followed by another daughter in 1891, whom they named Elizabeth after Vincent's mother. The cabin had become too small, so Vincent and the other ranch hands built an addition, creating a real house with separate bedrooms for the children and a larger kitchen and living area. Jack Morrison eventually offered to sell Vincent a portion of the ranch land, and Vincent and Penelope saved every penny until they could afford to buy it. They started their own small cattle operation, working alongside the Morrison Ranch, but building something that was entirely theirs. Penelope's writing continued to be published, and she eventually had enough articles to compile them into a book about frontier life that found a modest but appreciative audience. Their children grew up strong and independent, learning from their parents' example that marriage should be a partnership of equals, that work was honorable regardless of what form it took, and that the only person who could choose your path in life was yourself. James grew into a skilled rancher like his father, eventually taking over the management of the family cattle operation. Sarah became a teacher, running a small school in Bend where she taught children from all the surrounding ranches. Thomas decided to become a veterinarian, studying in Portland before returning to practice in Bend. Elizabeth followed in her mother's footsteps, becoming a writer whose novels about the West were read across the country. Vincent and Penelope grew older together, their love deepening with each passing year. They celebrated their 25th anniversary in 1908, surrounded by their children and grandchildren. The celebration was held at the ranch house they had built together, and as Penelope looked around at the family they had created, the life they had built from nothing but determination and love, she felt overwhelmed with gratitude. That night, as they lay in bed together, Vincent pulled her close and pressed a kiss to her silver-streaked hair. "Do you ever regret it?" he asked. "Running through that snow all those years ago," Penelope laughed softly. "Not for a single moment," she said. "That was the night I chose my own life. That was the night I found you." "I am glad you did," Vincent said, "because you are the best choice I ever made." They continued working the ranch together well into their 60s, slowing down only when their bodies demanded it. Even then, they remained active in the community and deeply involved in their children's and grandchildren's lives. Penelope published her memoirs in 1915, a book called Running Through Snow that told the story of her escape from an arranged marriage and the life she built afterward. It became a bestseller, particularly among young women who were beginning to fight for their own rights to choose their paths. Vincent lived to see his children all happily settled, his grandchildren grown, and even the birth of several great-grandchildren. He died peacefully in his sleep in the spring of 1920 at the age of 63 with Penelope holding his hand. His last words were, "I love you. I have always loved you. Thank you for arranging a marriage with me." Penelope lived for another 5 years, spending that time writing and enjoying her family. She never remarried, saying that she had found her great love and once was enough for a lifetime. She died in her sleep in the autumn of 1925 at the age of 63 in the house she and Vincent had built together. Their children found a letter she had written, to be opened after her death. In it, she wrote about the night she had run through the snow, desperate and terrified but determined to be free. She wrote about the cowboy who had taken her in and offered her not just shelter but a choice. She wrote about the life they had built together, based on mutual respect and love and partnership. And she ended with this: to anyone who reads this and finds themselves trapped in a life they did not choose, remember that it is never too late to run toward freedom. The path will not be easy. You may have to walk through snow and storms and face opposition from those who think they know what is best for you. But if you are brave enough to take that first step, you may find what I found: a life of your own choosing, a love that honors your humanity, and the profound joy that comes from being truly free. Run if you must, but run toward something, not just away. Run toward the life you want. Run toward love. And if you are very lucky, you may find someone waiting at the end of that snowy path who will look at you and say, "Arrange one with me," and you will know you are home. The letter was published in newspapers across the country, and it inspired a generation of women to demand the right to choose their own lives and their own loves. And while Penelope and Vincent never knew the full impact of their story, their descendants did, carrying forward the legacy of two people who had dared to choose each other when the world tried to choose for them. The ranch they built together remained in the family for generations, a testament to what two people could create when they worked as partners rather than master and subordinate. And every winter, when the snow fell heavy in the Oregon mountains, the family would gather and tell the story of the night Penelope Rutherford ran through a blizzard in a wedding dress, and the cowboy named Vincent Ashford who asked her to arrange a marriage with him instead. It became a family legend, a reminder that love was always a choice, and the best choices were the ones you made for yourself.